without Keaton Mitchell, the speed operation that they pivoted to a little bit more, spreading things out, the whole thing post Mark Andrews. Lamar made a lot of great plays, like I said, last Sunday night, but a lot of them were extensions because you couldn't get home for Jacksonville. And the question I would ask is, how many 49ers defensive linemen do you have to go down the list before you get to Jacksonville's second best defensive lineman? Welcome to the show. Macon's upstairs because I'm treating him like he has Ebola, although it's just a stomach bug. But the stomach bug has been going around, so little backstory. Macon playing hurt. I appreciate him, the whole thing. He's Jalen Hurts, only he's going to play better today. He was like, I'm coming in. We're doing the podcast. And I assumed that meant he felt better. And then on another group text, there was like an invitation to a lunch on Thursday, and he's like, "Nah, really still sick." And like I'm on my way to work, and I'm like, the math isn't adding up here. Like, so I get here, Macon hasn't texted me back. I said, hey, maybe you could take the day off or something, because personally, I don't feel like getting sick. We dodged a triple crown with Luke, pneumonia, strep, and then flu, one of the flus. And, it's been working its way around the office, but I've been dodging this thing, and I'm going to Philly today with my family. Remember, we were going to do a Christmas vacation, a warm weather vacation that my lovely wife, had decided to start planning December the 3rd. So that's why we're going to Philadelphia. We're not going anywhere warm. We're going to the 76ers and the Wolves. I'm really looking forward to that. Matt's giving me the American Psycho nod.gif because he is a sicko for the NBA, and he says it's one of the best matchups you could possibly see. But I don't want to get a stomach bug while I'm in Philly. I'm supposed to go ice skating tomorrow.
Are you going to ring the bell?
Supposedly I'm going to ring the bell. And my question was, hey, guys, like, I appreciate the tickets. These guys have always hooked me up, the Sixers and the whole thing. But, is it a code break to ring the bell every time you go to the game? Like, you know what I'm saying? Once a year, is that too much?
No, I think once a year is great. It's an honor. I would be asking the question, may I root for Anthony Edwards because he's the most electric player in the NBA? The Wolves are 20-5, dog.
No, I know. I don't know. I was just like, yeah, we're going to a Sixers game because I've been so busy. I haven't been able to really look at things more than a day out. And, Matt's like, who are they playing? And I'm like, the Wolves. He almost had a conniption because I guess they're the most exciting team in the NBA. Besides the Sixers. So I'm going to ring the bell. This is my third time. I think it's going to be my best one. The first one, I didn't even know what I was doing. Me and Lane Johnson went and did it in our dog masks. And I'll admit, I had a gummy and I didn't even know where to hit the bell. I was hitting the wrong part of the bell because it's not self-explanatory when you get up there. It's not like landing a 747. I'm but a man. There's some things as a man that I need some instruction on. I need instruction on this bell. So when we get there, I'm going to take a few practice swings on an imaginary bell. I'm going to go out there. I'm not going to embarrass my family. And then tomorrow we're going ice skating at some point, which is a big revenge game for me because the last time I had skates on, I probably had a concussion, undiagnosed as a kid. There was no protocol. My parents didn't put me through protocol. I saw stars, hit the back of my head like Trevor Lawrence. This is a big revenge game for me.
That's appropriate now that the Flyers are wearing the dog mask.
How about that, dude? Every once in a while, I look up and I'm like, yeah, we did some shit there. That's pretty cool. Those hockey guys are cool.
Hey, man,
so anyways.
Let me give you the cliff notes because I hear stomach bug and I shrug it off. I'm like, yeah, whatever. I was in the hospital, okay? I crawled through the doors of the hospital to try to get some sort of IV fluid in me, and they obliged, and I started to feel better. It's about 9 p.m. when I'm leaving the hospital Monday, and my lovely wife Kate says, "Hey, can you not come home because contagious and such?" I was like, "Yeah, sure, no problem, I get it." Went to the hotel. Okay, I got a hotel room. Took a shower, got in bed. Okay, dozed off. Got a phone call about 10:30. It's my lovely wife Kate. Hey, one kid's up throwing up, the other two are up screaming, you need to come home.
That sucks, dude.
I'll see you in a few.
You know what? That's like one of these quarterbacks that thinks they're done. You're like Zach Wilson in that situation.
Yes.
You're like, all right, I'm at the hotel. This is my home. Everything that I care about is in between these walls. And your wife's like, MacGruber, it's cunt, and then you got to go home.
It was
So, I mean, like,
incredible. It was an incredible
I feel
night.
bad for you.
Thank you.
I feel bad for you.
We're on the rebound. Everybody's good. Everybody's good.
I'm sure the people at the hospital rushed right by the past the people with gunshot wounds and car accident victims and tended to you immediately.
Dude, that ER is for real. And shout out to my roommate who had a bunch of hemorrhoids on my Angus, who I hope he's doing better as well.
Wait, who had hemorrhoids?
I was sharing a room.
At the hospital?
Yeah, and there's like a curtain between
Isn't that a
us.
HIPAA violation?
Maybe. I don't know his name. I'm not sharing any social security numbers. But he said, yeah, Doc, I got a bunch of hemorrhoids on my Angus.
You said Angus?
He said Angus every time. It was amazing.
That guy, every time he goes to a steakhouse, he's like, Angus beef, that sounds terrible. So,
rump roast.
yeah, rump roast. Glad to have you out of the hospital, and we put you upstairs for sure. Like it's the movie Contagion, but I don't want to take any chances. So it's actually really good seeing you on the Zoom. This is kind of fun. Maybe we should just start doing more quarantine pods.
Yeah, the light's a little warmer up here. I don't look as butt cheeks. But no, that text message to the group was just to get out of a lunch. I think you knew that.
I figured that.
Yeah.
I figured that, but it's hard to know with you sometimes. So we are going to get pretty much right into the previews because I do have to head to Philly in about an hour here, and Lord knows when we get to talking about these games, it's hard to stop. So Macon, where are we going to start with this week's games?
We're going to start in the Dom DeSandro tier. These tiers are named after Italian Americans. R.I.P. to Dom DeSandro, who is watching us from above, as Joe Buck so stated on Monday.
Wild shot.
On Monday night.
He had like a white orchid in front of him. I thought he was at like a funeral. He had like a black sweatsuit on. I was like, is everything okay? But at least he's taken care of. He's like Browning's girlfriend.
And we'll start with what is potentially a Super Bowl preview. Baltimore Ravens at San Francisco 49ers. Pair of 11-3 clubs. Niners favored by 5.5 coming off the win over the Cards last week.
So we're doing what, Christmas Eve game, Christmas Day games for the first time, right? Like we're taking the NBA shit.
Yep.
And we're like, hey, NBA, like, what do you got? Suns, Lakers? That's cool.
It's not the first time, but they're doing it again.
They're doing
and
it again.
Their flag is fully planted. And the in-season tournament took away the Christmas Day luster a little bit, so it's all you guys now.
Dude, it's all us. And the NFL is just like, wham, here's my nuts on Christmas Day. Good luck moving them. We've got the Niners and the Ravens in a Super Bowl preview because a lot of people believe that. And like what I realized in starting to do this YouTube show is that I meet a lot of fans that don't listen to the show, and maybe the only time that they come across our stuff is when there's a pointed YouTube video that goes out and targets their fan base. And what I've realized about Ravens fans is I am a big fan of your team. I picked you to win the division. I got nothing but good things to say about Lamar. But when I express concern about Mark Andrews or Keaton Mitchell, or the fact that like, hey, a lot of those plays on Sunday night were play extensions where it's predicated on the rush not getting there. You guys think I'm hating on you? I'm not hating on you. I still think you're one of the best 3 teams in the AFC, and you might have one of the best chances to beat the San Francisco 49ers in the Super Bowl. And this game's not only a Super Bowl preview, but it's also an MVP deciding game. Like, barring something unforeseen down the stretch, because the MVP has become kind of like the Heisman to me. It's like who has the biggest win, the latest, and has the best stats. It's changed 4 times this year. And I think it's landed squarely with Brock Purdy versus Lamar Jackson, and Purdy's the favorite. And I think that probably reflects the fact that Vegas thinks they're going to win this game. I mean, that's a lot of points for a Super Bowl preview, 5.5 or whatever it is. Lamar's really good as a dog. But the question I would ask is, without Keaton Mitchell, the speed operation that they pivoted to a little bit more, spreading things out, the whole thing post Mark Andrews, Lamar made a lot of great plays, like I said, last Sunday night, but a lot of them were extensions because you couldn't get home for Jacksonville. And the question I would ask is, how many 49ers defensive linemen do you have to go down the list before you get to Jacksonville's second best defensive lineman? I don't know what the answer to that is, but there's a big difference in the guys that are going to be chasing this guy around in the pass game And then there's a big difference in the guys that are going to be chasing him around when the play breaks down on the second level. And if you got Dre Greenlaw and Fred Warner patrolling the middle of the field, mixing in some spy, I think for me, the biggest question is, are you going to be able to stop the run game and Gus Edwards? If you can do that, I think San Francisco is going to have a really nice day. And no disrespect to the Ravens, but I really do think San Francisco is in a class of their own. And I would have said the same thing before the Eagles game. I hinted at just that. Me, just so you know, and this is almost going to be a bit now, because this isn't an Eagles podcast, but I'm an Eagles guy. When you hear me not give out a play on an Eagles game, that means I'm picking against the Eagles. I will never say the Eagles are going to lose until they're like a bad team, and I can do that every week. Call me biased, call me whatever you want, but just read the tea leaves a little bit. San Francisco is really good. Can the Ravens score enough to keep pace? That's kind of my question. They like spacing concepts, and for San Francisco, you should be able to manage that. I just think it's crazy, Make, that the beginning of the season, it was the NFC was an afterthought. People were like, hey, the AFC, it's just so loaded, it's so lopsided. And it is deeper in a lot of ways if all the quarterbacks were healthy and that sort of thing. But, the Dolphins are favored by a point at home against the Cowboys this week off a Cowboys game where they got their asses kicked in Buffalo. And I think that line's probably right to be within 3 points either way. But what I am saying is that, you look across the country at this game, and San Francisco's laying almost a touchdown at home against the Ravens. And so the power in the league has shifted the NFC's way. And I think it's just very interesting.
Probably a little bit different if they have Mark Andrews and Keaton Mitchell. Going back to the beginning of the season, J.K. Dobbins, Duvernay, a couple guys on defense. Baltimore a little bit shorthanded. But as a guy who was on the Jags, holy heck was that frustrating watching Lamar just have as much time as he wanted to dance around and pick what he wanted to do. Throw or run or do whatever. And the Ravens are averaging 163 yards on the ground, which is a wild number. We'll see if they'll be able to do that moving forward with Gus and Justice. Likely not this Christmas Day, though.
And I'm not saying we were on the right side, mate, because we were both on the Jags. You gave it out. I bet it. But, it has to be a top 5 frustrating game that I bet this year, because the Jags cannot get out of their own way. And I really did think the delta between those teams wasn't as big as the score indicated. And that's not taking anything away from the Ravens, but the Jags just couldn't. They beat themselves. And we're going to get to the Jags in a little bit. But I cannot wait for this game. Again, it's like, hey, we own Christmas. Mm-hmm. You know what I'm saying? It's an MVP deciding game. It's a Super Bowl preview in a lot of people's minds. And I cannot wait for Monday night.
You mentioned it, 10-4 Cowboys at 10-4 Dolphins. The line is 1.5. Cowboys coming off a 3-touchdown loss against Buffalo. Dak on the road again. Dolphins took care of business against the Jets. What do you see? Does Dak stay true to redacted on the road, or does he bounce
so I'm
back?
I'm on the boys here. I really am, Make. This was the first lock I gave out. Akin to me feeling really sure about the Bills last week. This is a spot where if you're just a gambler and you buy a team low, you sell a team high, this is a perfect spot for that, because the Dolphins have been in this pattern of bad loss to a good team, disappointing, thing happening, and then they beat the dog shit out of some team that in my opinion is not great, like the Jets. Even as good as their defense is, when your offense is pressured at an 80% plus click, you're not going to get much help from that group. And, as the game went on, the fake punt early in the game, the whole thing, like that game with a competent offense from the Jets is probably a little closer. They blank them 30-0. So this week, Dolphins fans are all the way back in, and I don't blame them. It's a very talented group, even with Tyreek off the field, even with the offensive line injuries they've had. I give a lot of credit to that coach and also to Tua last week for getting the ball out at a 2.1 second clip. That's kind of like when they live in that under 2.4 seconds in that area, they can play with anybody. It's a nightmare to play this offense if they can operate on schedule. I figure Cheetah's going to play. Like, that's the way I think about this. I put something on the Cowboys when it first came out and they're a 1-point favorite. I would bet them to like 4. But I also believe that when Cheetah is announced, this line's going to move a little bit. So I'm sitting tight right now. But watch the line and grab the Cowboys. You might think Miami's going to run the ball. Look what happened Sunday. But this is a totally different running attack, and it's a totally different personnel, and it's a totally different flavor. I don't think they're physical enough to pound the ball on the Cowboys the way the Bills did. And it comes down to, really, for me, how do you do on first and second down on the edge for the Cowboys? The Eagles game, they created negatives. They knocked down stretch plays. They have dynamic edge guys, Josh Sweat, Hassan Reddick. Dallas has the same thing. And, like if they can be that penetrating defense that I know they are, they'll knock these plays down on the edge and they'll play the flats with the team speed they have, top down. And if you can create negatives, that's your best shot on third down. Because I do think the one thing that scares me for the Cowboys is the middle of the field. Talked about this a lot. I don't think they're great in the middle of the field, not up front, not at backer. That's an area that if you're not great, the Dolphins can pick you apart. So can they hide that better than the Dolphins can hide their offensive line? That's the chess match in this game. Who can hide the weakness better? And I think Dallas can probably hide that weakness better. The thing that worries me about Dallas a little bit is if you went back and watched the Washington game, they racked up a lot of yardage and had a lot of success throughout the game, really. They got into trouble because of short yardage in the second half, couldn't finish drives. But they moved the ball with the quick game in Dallas. And, I kind of worry about that little snapshot. But this is a big chance on the road for Dak and for the Cowboys to go win against a team with a winning record in December. We talked about that record last week. I think it was something like 2-5 or 2-6 against teams going to the playoffs in December. If you take out, them beating us at home week 17, 2017, where we're resting guys. This is an opportunity for them to go right that ship. And Dak versus zone, not as good. But one key thing is I think he struggles more against middle field closed coverages. And that's what gave him issues last week. He does a better job against quarters and, against six and split safety stuff. And Fangio is going to run more of that stuff. Now, does Fangio say, hey, does he notice what I'm noticing? I'm sure he does. Does he feel like he can get into those looks? I really like for Dallas Pollard out of the backfield. I think that was an inclination for me. We ran the numbers. Pollard, like middle of the league in success rate in the passing game, but the Dolphins bottom 10 when you play running backs out of the backfield in the pass game. So the injuries are big. Like Martin could be out. That's a big deal. He's got a quad. You got Wilkins. You got Sealer looming. They've got some good players up front. But the big question for me about that Dolphins defense is they've been at the top of the league in a lot of categories since week 4. Now, I look closely at the teams they've played, and I believe this can be an elite unit. And at times I've wanted more out of this unit. But they played the Panthers, the Patriots, the Raiders, the Jets twice, the Titans, and the Commies. And they've also played the Chiefs and the Eagles, who, according to a lot of people, are actually not good offenses. So, this is a really big test for them, playing a big-time offense at home. And for Dallas, they want to beat teams with good records in December. And Miami wants to beat good teams, period, because they haven't done it. And that's why I say these two teams are kind of like mirror images in some ways.
Yeah.
And so this is a big test for both teams and a lot on the line when it comes to playoff seeding, because Dallas thought they were giving a game up to the Eagles, then watched the Eagles flounder on Monday night. And now the Dolphins are chasing that number 1 seed because Baltimore's going Sunday. They're going to travel out to San Francisco and play Monday. And if you're the Dolphins, you feel pretty good about the chances of them losing that game. You want to pick up a game. This is huge.
Last time the Dolphins beat a team with a winning record was October 2022. Christmas Eve, a thick cloud cover and breezy with a shower in spots. High of 77, low of 68 for Santa Claus in Miami Gardens. Let's check on the comeback kids, Chris.
Yeah.
Browns at Texans. Browns came back to beat the Bears last week. Texans got the Titans. Now we're hearing C.J. Stroud might miss his second game in a row.
So this really fucked me, Mike. I know you looked at the locks. I just can't catch a gosh darn break. Gave out the Texans, figuring that C.J. Stroud's going to play. That number was Texans laying like 2 points, and now this line has swung to the Texans catching 3. And I still don't think it's doom and gloom for the Texans. Like, I like Case Keenum. He's a guy who used to play for the Browns. He's popular in a lot of cities because people really like the guy for some of the spot starts that he's been able to come in and look competent. And, like last week, kind of pulled that one out of his ass. That was a huge game for them. But part of me wonders with the C.J. Stroud concussion are the Texans like punting on the season? I'm not saying that he's not ready, but if he's close and they're not sure, like, is it something you want to mess around with? I said earlier this week, if they had Tank Dell and they were at full strength, I think they can win a playoff game. I think they can go to Kansas City and win. I think they can go to Miami and win. I think they can beat the best teams in the AFC. They showed you that with Cincinnati on the road earlier this year when they were at full strength. But I just don't know now. And so you kind of wonder what the Texans are thinking. Like, do you chance it if he takes a turn for the better late in the week? But Keenum is a good backup to have. Again, the line has moved about 5 points, and Stroud's maybe worth that much. But on the report, you also have Nico Collins, maybe up, maybe down. Emerson's a really good matchup for anybody that you consider the number one on the field on Sunday. And then even with Delpit down, I think you're in good shape. The question for me is, do the Texans have run concepts that work against this team? Because Singletary's come on. Last week he was really good. He was a big part of them winning that game, especially in a game where you're not really afraid of anybody beating you on the back end. And so you do have to commit some bodies, or you choose to commit some bodies and handle the run game, and you have confidence in the back end. This is a team that has real reason to have confidence in the back end. So I kind of wonder how they dare Case Keenum in spots to beat them. But I don't know if they have to, because usually the teams that rack up run yardage on the Cleveland Browns are gap scheme teams, and Slowick is not a gap scheme guy. Now, we saw it with Indy. They major an inside zone, and they came out and ran some gap scheme and scored 38 points on these guys. And I think this is the biggest question when it comes to the Cleveland Browns. Can they go on the road? Can that defense travel? Defense usually travels, but not this defense so far this year. There is a 17-point delta in who they are at home and on the road. They're best in the league at home. They're worst in the league on the road. They're giving up almost 30 points a game. And so, when you talk about who the best defenses in the league are, how good is your defense if it's not functional for you in January? Because the only way that they're going to make a run is winning on the road. And so I look at this game for them as a playoff tune-up. Like, I think the Browns are going to be in. They have to take care of business. But when you look at going down to Houston, where this team's played better and this team's going to have their backs against the wall, this is the feeling it's gonna be when you go on the road in January. And so, to me, for this defense, I want to prove that that defense travels, and it's a great opportunity for them. And it's kind of a question, like, we make a big deal about the Eagles without Dom DeSandro. They're 0-3. Is the dog pound their Dom DeSandro? Is it the dog pound for them? Is that their Dom DeSandro? We'll find out, because this weekend, this is a matchup they should win defensively. And the Texans, the way they closed that game out last week, is the defensive line, who hadn't got enough credit this year. And Will Anderson's going to be down, probably, right? It's a high ankle. Those are a bitch to play with 2 weeks out. I don't know. But if they can take advantage of these two tackles for Cleveland, because Cleveland has morphed into a passing football team. They ran the ball like 18 times last week. That doesn't sound like the Cleveland Browns of September and October, or DTR starting ball games. Flacco has thrown the ball like 40 times a game. So you're going to have opportunities to create turnovers. The Bears did it. They couldn't get anything off their turnovers. The trend has continued with the Bears, where it's the last 9 picks, I think they scored 13 points off those turnovers. But can the Texans create one or two? Can that D-line take advantage of these guys who are up for the Browns?
Texans were on my lock list that I sent in. I also anticipated CJ playing. Thoughts and prayers are with you.
Thank you. Total fuckery.
Another team on my lock list that I am on are the Jacksonville Jaguars. They're at Tampa Bay. Jacksonville 3 weeks ago, 8-3. We were talking about path to a number 1 seed, home field advantage throughout. And now they're a dog at Tampa Bay and Coach Todd Bowles, +1.
Coach of the Year, Todd Bowles.
Coach of the Year.
Thoughts and prayers to Stanford Steve.
Yeah.
So I think what's interesting about this game is this, like Trevor and Baker. Okay, when I say Trevor and Baker, NFL fans for the most part have different ideas of who these guys are. But this year, there's a lot they have in common. Both leading teams to division leads, 7-7 for the Bucs, and at 8-6, you're tied for the division lead in Jacksonville. Now, Trevor has gone 65%, 3,500 yards, 18 touchdowns, 10 interceptions. Baker 63%, Baker 63%, 3,300 yards, 24 touchdowns, 8 interceptions. Both offenses have struggled to move the ball at times, and both offenses have good receiving options. So, you can see that as it stands today, these two players are not that far apart. If anything, Baker's played better this year, and they're both number one picks. If you can remember the circumstances where these guys got drafted, Macon, remember it was tank for Trevor. And then on the other end of it, it was like they're actually drafting Baker first. Mm-hmm. This guy's short. He has a temper. He looks like my uncle out there. Is he really a number one overall pick? But with Trevor, we were like, yeah, look at the high ass on this guy. Look at the big muscles. Look at the big arm. Look at the he's a warrior. I mean, he has all the intangibles, and I still believe that stuff about him. Right down to the high ass. The guy's a physical specimen. But there's not that much difference if you look closely in how these two situations could play out. Okay, and I'm not saying Trevor's not the guy in Jacksonville. This is a big stretch for him down the stretch. And obviously, there's more football to play to decide this. But with Baker, you had Hugh and Kitchens and some combination of that for 2 years. And Freddie Kitchens doesn't even look like an offensive coordinator. He looks like one of Hank Hill's friends. And he's 49 touchdowns, 35 picks over that 2-year span. And then comes Stefanski, his Doug Peterson, right? A real coach. And he goes 11-5, wins a playoff game for the Browns. They were electric that year at times. And he's 26 touchdowns, 8 interceptions. And then you have the injuries, which is a thing that Trevor Lawrence has dealt with and could deal with more down the road. He's a tough guy. He wants to play. It's like Baker playing in a shoulder sling to start that very next year. And at that point, early in the season, week 2, he gets dinged and tries to play through. And then eventually he gets moved and he's on a bunch of teams. And now here he is. And for Trevor, rookie year, a lot of picks, 12-17. He had his Freddie Kitchens, there in Urban Meyer, 4,100 yards the next year, 25-8 when he had a real coach. So, my question to people would be, and as you frame thinking about this game, what has Trevor Lawrence done that Baker Mayfield hasn't?
Do you know Trevor's career record as a starter?
No.
20-28. Oh,
so
a worse percentage than Baker.
So all I'm saying is, and I know some people during that kind of diatribe are thinking come on, Chris, that's a stretch. But honestly, it's not a hot take that, Trevor could go out to the coin toss and, he's like, I'm looking at Baker Mayfield and I'm looking at Trevor from the future,
Spider-Man.
This is the Spider-Man meme situation possibly if Trevor doesn't turn it around, and I bet you Baker would say, hey, take care of your body, and that's something that Trevor at times in the best interest of his team, he thinks he hasn't taken care of his body, and he showed up in big spots and actually looked pretty good, like the New Orleans game earlier this year and the whole thing. But he's got a concussion this week. Does he even play? But if we get these two guys, I think it's easy to say, well, the Jags are better and Trevor's better. This is a bounce back game for the Jags, but I still think Trevor's got a lot to prove. And I think Baker has less pressure on him. Baker's out there playing with house money. He already died. You know what I mean? He's back from the dead. Trevor hasn't gone through that yet, and maybe that happens at some point if he keeps playing the way he's played. But there's not much that separates these guys this year. And I thought it's a Jag spot. The Packers threw the ball around all over the field, really. I mean, Love wasn't that bad last week. He had some big spots in that game, but they had Carlton Davis out. We don't have an update on that. And really, it was a thing where they made Love throw the ball outside the numbers. If Trevor has to throw the ball outside the numbers, those are the throws he has to hit. And this team absolutely needs him to make the throws that Jordan made. The difference is going to be that defense has to take away that newfound identity. The newfound identity for Tampa Bay is, we can run the ball. We figured it out over the last month with Dave Canales and Rashard White, who I think is a very good player, out of the backfield as well. Rashad White, only the 17th time that I'm going to make that mistake this year. But they're going to be calling his name a lot this weekend to see if they can test that run front. I think that's the big key to the game. If Jacksonville can control that run game and make them one-dimensional, it'll be a look that they haven't seen over the last month. Jags play a lot of cover 3, just like the Packers, but I think the personnel is better, and I think the coordinator's better. On the other side of things, I think Trevor Lawrence has to be better against the blitz. It's not something he's done a great job of. So not a foregone conclusion. Some people look at this line and say, Jacksonville by 1. But this is a big spot, and both teams have a lot of similarities.
Final game of our top tier, 10-4 Lions at 7-7 Vikings. Vikings just lost by 3 to the Bengals. Next 2 for Vikings after this one, home Packers, and then at Lions. The line is -3, Detroit on the road.
I don't know what it is for me, but there's those moments that you talk about for a couple decades. I remember where I was when this happened. I remember when I was a kid in Detroit and the Lions clinched on Christmas Eve for the first time in over 20 years. I just got chills saying that, and I'm not even a Lions fan. I still have chills. They won't go away.
Wayne Fonz.
Because this is fucking insane, man. I mean, like what Dan Campbell's done here to put them in position to take over this division. And we talked about the fact that Jordan Love coming on, Kevin O'Connell getting hired, you don't just win a division and stay there. You have to continue to grow as a team and as a franchise. They're going to have to stave these teams off in the future. But right now, you have a chance to put this thing away. And I think if they clinch on Christmas, it's got to be one of the top 5, 10 American sports moments. And by that, I mean, this is just an all-American sports moment. A downtrodden franchise, middle of America, Rust Belt, all the factories are empty, people fleeing this city.
Pistons have lost 26 straight.
Pistons lost 20. I didn't even know that. Is that true?
Something like that.
It's the downtrodden team having that moment. And if you know anything about becoming a good team, enjoy people loving you while you can. Because, on a bigger scale, the Chiefs used to be everybody's darling, and now they're tired of them. And so right now, like Detroit, you have it going. Everybody's pulling for you. Most of America's pulling for you. If you're not pulling for the Lions and you're not a Minnesota Vikings fan, I think you're mad at yourself this weekend. There's something wrong in your life if you're not pulling for the Lions. And maybe you took the Vikings +3 or +3.5, but I really do think this is a good spot for Detroit. Last year when they played each other in the second game, it's not an exact inverse of this situation, but Minnesota was kind of that established team. They were making a playoff run. Detroit was ascending. They were 500. Now Detroit is here. So if you want to hold this division, not just this year, but over the next couple of years, you have to win divisional games in December. This is the biggest statements you can make, and you're going to see this team twice, maybe 3 times. So you want to keep it so you don't see this team 3 times, and so that the next time they play you, they're like, fuck. This is a bad matchup. I think they have the physicality to punish this defense. They also have the speed that B-Flow in this defense has not yet seen with Gibbs and all the Jamison Williams and Amon-Ra, the quick answers to the blitz that I don't think the Vikings are used to. So I think this is a good matchup for them. Jared Goff, okay, not terrible against the blitz, but I think you're inside. Hey, let's get you back inside, Jared Goff. 2 weeks in a row, under a roof. This is a good spot for Detroit. I really feel that way. Minnesota ran the ball last week. That's the question, because they ran it on Cincy. Cincy lost Reader early in the game, but I thought they were going to run the ball anyways, because they were getting movement early. And then, the Lions on the other side without McNeil. So who can take advantage of that void in the middle a little bit better? The Vikings absolutely have to. Because if you look at Mullins, you want play action pass, you want to hit the middle of the field. I would take that away. If C.J. Gardner-Johnson comes back, there's another guy to commit to the middle of the field and make him make throws outside. This podcast is brought to you by Cash App, the all-in-one app for spending, sending, and setting easy-to-track savings goals. With multiple tools for saving, spending, and sending, Cash App is an all-in-one way to stay in control of your money. Whether I need to send money to my pumpkin grower, pay for anything related to floating the river, quickly pay back a buddy for a night out on the town, or settle a bet, I can always count on Cash App. With security, boosts, discounts, a free-to-order debit card, no overdraft fees, Cash App is like a BFF for your money. It can be your Reed. Reed's my BFF in the studio. Cash App, the exclusive financial services partner of Greenlight. Download it in the App Store or Google Play to see why it's the number one finance app in the U.S. App Store.
Middle tier's the Beverly D'Angelo tier. Beverly D'Angelo is an Italian-American treasure. I thought you might say that. Mrs. Clark Griswold, does that do anything for you?
Oh, yeah, I know who that is. Why didn't you say like James Gandolfini on one of these?
Because Beverly D'Angelo is deserving. I mean, she bared her chest for us, Chris.
Yeah, she did. You're right. Now I know who she is in the pool.
In the shower. There's another young lady in the pool. I don't remember the
shower scene like that. But
Bills at Chargers. Chris, as a GIF or as a GIF, everybody's rooting for the Bills. That line is now 12 points. This game's being played on Saturday.
This is a Macon classic in the locks. Like, I knew you would give this out because, you know, the little light reading will tell you the sharps are on the Chargers. It's a blind faith thing. You know, it opened at 14. Now it's 11. Like, every person that I'm like, hey, why are you on the Chargers? They can't answer it. You know, like, and maybe I'll ask you, and maybe you have a good reason. But, like, the interim coach bump is it for me. Like, and I think a lot of times you think, well, what gives? It's Easton Stick. The defense is actually pretty bad. You know, the offensive line's bad. Eckler can't see the field anymore. The receivers are hurt. Here's what I think. I think when you look at Vegas and what they did to LA last week and what they've done over the last 4 to 6 weeks of the season, they're not, like, can they be that much better than they were under Josh McDaniels? I don't think it's necessarily a thing of like improvement. I think it's a deal where you stay out of the things that hurt you. And, you know, Josh McDaniels is gone, so he's out of the way. You know, is Brandon how in the way was Brandon Staley? You know what I mean? Mm-hmm. And, you know, there's a reason they fired him. So, and he's bad enough, in my opinion, that it's not just like a marginal improvement to have anybody out there not named Brandon Staley. Like, they will improve. I think that. But the Bills, man, I think the only way they lose this game or it's close is if they turn the ball over. So if I'm the Bills, I do what I did last week. I just say, hey, we're trying to go on a run. We're going to have to play more games than anybody who wants to go where we're trying to go. And all these games, of all the teams that have to win out to get in, they're the ones with real Super Bowl chances. And so I would look at this as like the shorter we can make this game, the better. The sooner we can get on the plane, the better. The less time that players are out there with a chance to get hurt, the better. Run the clock down to 3 seconds on the play clock, pound the ball. When you got to throw, I love the middle of the field with these tight ends against these backers. I would just shorten the fucking game. And as it stood going into that Sam Howell game earlier in the season with McDermott, and I know the defense looked different. He was 8-0 against quarterbacks with 5 or fewer starts. Howell threw 4 picks. The Bills have handled travel well. Like, they just did KC, traveling west. Last year, the opener against the Rams, they thumped them. You know, how do you fix the Chargers is a question we could talk about in this breakdown because we're not really breaking down the game. I think there's two options if you're the new head coach of the Chargers next year. There's a lot to be excited about, but it's either a rebuild or a retool. And, you know, those decisions are going to tell you, do you move just Keenan Allen or do you move Mike Williams too? Although Mike Williams going to be on the wrong side of 30 off a knee, like maybe there's not the market for that guy. But there are decisions like Mack and Bosa. Do you move one or do you move both? Like, it's a no-brainer to maybe sell Mack high. You know, a team like we were talking about Jacksonville, or we were talking about some of these teams that would kill to have a rusher like that this year. Those are the first calls I make. And, you know, with the wide receivers, I'm calling Houston. I'm calling, I don't know, am I calling Kansas City? You know, like, by the time you're never going to trade Keenan in division. But there are teams that could use even an aging veteran like that who's still making plays, whether it's wide receiver or defensive end. And if you look at Bosa, he's played in 14 games over the last 2 years. So there's a lot of questions you have to answer. I think you got to go attack the draft and grab a right tackle because those guys don't hit free agency. You can't trade for one. And I also think the receiver class is deep. So if you want to handle some of these things early, you can go get a receiver later. Retool the linebacker room. People say you got to make decisions on Derwin James. I wouldn't. But there's a lot that you have to figure out if you're that new GM, if you're the new coach. Just looking ahead at what we've got, because I haven't had a chance to talk to you about it, I think it's an attractive job, but I think you need a cap whiz at GM because you got this quarterback under contract till 2030. You got to work around that, and you have to make a decision. Do you want to go for it next year, or do you just want to rebuild?
Next two for the 8-6 Bills, home Pats at Dolphins. Let's go AFC North. Bengals 2-point favorites in Pittsburgh. Pittsburgh has lost 3 in a row to the Cardinals, Patriots, and Colts. It's going to be Mason Rudolph.
So Nolan worked this little list up, and I think it's an interesting list. Like if Tomlin doesn't lose his job, there's still going to be changes. And, I hate it because I've been picked up by Blitzburg, by Steelers Depot, by Steelers Wire, by, all these fucking aggregator sites, which I appreciate them picking us up and the whole thing and crediting us in the articles really well. But, I'm seeing a lot of tweets this week that are saying that I'm calling for the firing of Mike Tomlin, when I don't think that's what we did on Monday. Kyle called for it last week, and I said I could see that. But the segment ended with me saying, I think Mike Tomlin deserves the respect of not being fired figuratively or physically with 3 games left in the season. Let's see how this thing ends up for him. Obviously he's lost control of it a little bit, but this is the first time I've ever seen this happen. And it also doesn't seem like an organization that just makes knee-jerk decisions. The culture is so important; you'd have to reset there. So this was interesting because I think you'd have to go replace obviously the coordinator. There's nobody in-house that you feel like elevating. Brian Greasy's the name that Nolan brought up. Brian Callahan, he's the offensive coordinator in Cincy. Greasy's in San Francisco, quarterbacks coach. Robinson's the quarterback coach with the Rams. Another option is Gerard Johnson. He's the Texans QB coach. Nolan threw him on the list. You could pick that first branch off the Slowick tree. Bevel, you remember him. He's the QB and passing coordinator in Miami. And Jason Vrabel, not related to Mike, receiver and passing coordinator in Green Bay. And then lastly, I think Frank Smith is a guy, would fit the profile of a guy that probably wants to be a head coach, but could also use calling the plays himself. And, if you got to have a guy there that understands the run game, because I think that's what you lean into next year. I think Kenny can run a West Coast offense. And if you look around the league, some of these offenses that are doing a really good job, they're modernized West Coast offenses. I would look there. Now, zooming into this game, because they're not out of it, this is an absolute playoff game for both teams. They cannot afford to lose. The loser's going to Cancun or wherever it is. It's that time where guys are planning off-season trips, and the Steelers and the Bengals haven't had to plan it yet, but Monday you'll know. Steelers laying 2 on the road earlier in the season. Now they're if you calculate that, they're 1-point favorites on a neutral site. Now they're catching 2.5 at home. Something's not adding up. To me, are the Steelers that much worse? Is the loss of the safeties that big a deal? I think it might be. But the question to me is the loss of Reeder even bigger for Cincinnati? Because the first time they played, Pittsburgh had the ball for 37 minutes. They almost had the ball for more minutes than Cincinnati ran plays. Cincinnati ran 38 plays. I haven't crunched the numbers, but I don't know if a team ran less plays on any given Sunday this season than Cincy did the first time. The 2 big drives they had where they scored a touchdown and a field goal, there was one thing in common: big Jamar Chase chunks. Jamar Chase probably not playing this weekend. Mixon went 8 carries for 16 yards. So I do think there's something about the Steelers defense that's not going to agree with Jake Browning the way that Minnesota, the way that Jacksonville, the way that Indy has with this offense. And I think although I'd lean over, because I have a theory here. The NFL in these standalone games, whether they're Saturdays or Christmas or when everybody's watching, they want these overs to hit. That's the conspiratorial part of my brain. And I do think these two teams are going to move the ball. This is the first game a month and a half ago or a month ago that you didn't have Matt Canada's shadow looming over the offense, and you had 400 yards. Now, I don't know if I feel as good about the Steelers if they were starting Trubisky, but maybe Mason Rudolph Christmas week keeps them in the playoffs.
And that was also, that first meeting was the first time we saw Jake Browning. We didn't know he was going to be super competent.
And I don't know if you can chalk it up to that. We'll see.
Yeah.
You know, we're going to learn a lot about Cincinnati's, viability in the playoffs this weekend.
8-6 Colts are at 6-8 Falcons. Did you see Arthur Smith say this week that he's going to die trying to get it right? Love that quote. Loved it. And it's going to be Heineke. If we were doing locks right now, I'd look hard at the Falcons -1 point.
I was too, Make, and I might bet them, but here's my big question. And this might be the biggest, Uncle Rico bowl of all time with two quarterbacks who just march to the beat of their own drummer. They're regular guys. Taylor Heineke's got a Busch Light sweatshirt on this week. Minshew leaves his van every morning to go to work.
Also in a Busch Light sweatshirt.
Yeah, he's probably got Busch Light in his mini fridge in the RV, and so this is a lot of fun. These two guys, they mirror each other in certain ways, and I think they're guys that you can rally around. And Indy's been able to rally around Minshew. And I said this Monday, it's insane to me, and I said it again the other day, but you weren't in, that the Falcons, with a game they absolutely have to win, bench Bijan for turning the ball over, and the guy that you've been protecting all year, the quarterback, has turned the ball over at every turn. I think they had him in for one drive in the preseason. He threw a pick. We've seen enough. All right, let's get to the regular season where you do more of the same. And last week, all you needed was a game manager, and he couldn't even do that down in the red zone, against the Carolina Panthers. So I just think Arthur Smith, some of these decisions this year have been really mind-boggling. Going back now to Heineke, I think it's the right move. But the big question to me that's keeping me from jumping all over the Falcons, and by the way, the line moved 4 or 5 points, I feel like, and that to me is a sign that Vegas agrees on Heineke and Ritter. I don't know if it was 4 points; it was a couple points. My big concern is the Colts. You think you can run the ball on them? You think that's your advantage? You've been banged up front, and they get Grover Stewart back, who makes a big difference. And if you watched this Colts front last week, they were hell on wheels. They were penetrating. They were knocking guys back. I had Buckner on the pod this week. They got a good group up front when Grover's there. And so that's my big question. Can you run the ball on them even with the way they played last week? And then, offensively for the Colts, they're down guys, Pittman, Moss, but they could get Taylor back. So in a toss-up game, who do you trust, Steichen or Arthur Smith? That's what's keeping me from mashing the Falcons.
And a producer can chime in, but I think Defo may even be on this here pod.
Yes, sir.
Oh, yeah, he's on this pod. So we interviewed him. We threw him on YouTube. He's on this pod right after this preview, so you can hear more about this Colts front.
Raiders are at the Chiefs, AFC West. Raiders won 63-21 versus the Chargers. You may remember Chiefs got New England 27-17. This game's on Monday. 10-point spread.
So I can kind of break these two mirror image kind of games down. The Giants and the Eagles, Kansas City and the Raiders, both teams, have had their struggles this year. Eagles more recently, more pronounced, but both hosting division foes, laying 10-plus points. And I think, maybe the reason I was listening to, I like this Action Network Favorites podcast, some of the gambling stuff they talk about on there, but some people I think the line's okay. I think Kansas City's 10 points better at home. I don't know how, if the Raiders are starting to air it out, I don't know how they do that against the Chiefs at Arrowhead and score. So I kind of lean under. But when I look at this matchup and the 10-point line, maybe that's the guard against teasers. For people at home that think about teasers, maybe Vegas is just pushing that up there to 10 so you don't get, and this is what Simon and those guys said on that Action Network podcast I thought was interesting, is as if you push a teaser, you lose, as I know. And maybe that's why that line's up there to protect against the 2.5. But I think Kansas City rolls. I think it's time to get into playoff mode for every guy on the roster. I think Vegas jumped them at home a month ago. They're not going to do that this week. And we heard Spags talk about this week. If you get a chance to listen to Spags, it's one of my favorite interviews of the year so far. Obviously one of the best DCs in the league, but I brought up red zone defense, and I didn't even mean to make it a thing about them, but you could see right away that's a big sticking point for him, where we have not been good enough in the red zone. So to me, for all the things they got to work out on offense, they have to work that out defensively come January. I do think Philly, I felt like this is a spot they cruise to, but then I saw Landon Dickerson down against this front, not great. And I think for the Eagles, if you don't start fast, you have to be ready to get booed. Like, I've seen this movie. If you come out with a 3-and-out early in the game, you're going to get booed. You know, how are you going to respond? And I talked about going to Seattle and wishing they played with more emotion. Like, this is an intangible thing. You should win this game, but you cannot come out of this game without playing with a boatload of emotion, because that can sometimes kickstart your team. Big win at home, guys jumping around, guys flying around. Matty P with another week running this defense. I feel like both teams roll here, but if I had a lean on who I would bet, it'd probably be Kansas City at home, because they've been here. You know, like the Eagles have been here too, but this team isn't acting like a team that's been here. You know, when you look closely at some of the things that have been said, some of the things I see on the field, Kansas City, even with their struggles, they're just a safer bet.
Darren Ravel called up Cutlets and said, "Why don't you show up at the pizzeria for free?" Tommy obliged. So a little bit of
Wow, that's fucked up with Darren. Like, Darren basically took $10,000 out of Tommy DeVito's pockets because Tommy can't say no because he looks like a bad guy, even though he's just doing business. And, you know, Pro Football Talk had some clickbaity headline that he dumped Stellato, but he didn't. He just hired a marketing guy because Stellato was handling his marketing stuff. You know, NFL players, they have agents, they have marketing guys. Good on Tommy DeVito to make that happen. You shouldn't have to worry when you buy tickets to your next big event. Game Time is the fast and easy way to buy tickets for all the sports, music, comedy, and theater events near you. With killer last-minute deals, all-in prices, views from your seat, and their best price guarantee, Game Time takes the guesswork out of buying tickets. Yeah, I'm on my Game Time app right now. I'm looking at Virginia Tech tickets. You know, maybe we'll win one of those at some point. We did it with Bryce Perkins. Anyways, I keep scrolling on the app. I'm going to get tickets to the Commonwealth Cup. Game Time makes it easy to find and buy tickets for every kind of event in your area, even last-minute deals. I know, because I always wait till the last minute. You can preview the views from all your seats in the venue, and Game Time's lowest price guarantee, event cancellation protection, job loss protection, protects my tickets. That's what I need. Game Time is obsessed with finding ways to help you save money on tickets. Game Time has deals on tickets right up to the start of the event and even an hour after it starts. It's the place to find last-minute seats. Find exclusive flash deals and sponsored deals on tickets for football, basketball, baseball, concerts, comedy, theater, and more. With zone deals, you pick the section and Game Time picks the seats for big-time savings. And the Game Time guarantee means you'll always get the best price. If you find tickets in the same section and row for less, Game Time will credit you 110% of the difference. Take the guesswork out of buying tickets with Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, and use code GREENLIGHT for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, create an account and redeem code GREENLIGHT. GREENLIGHT. That's the code for $20 off. Download Game Time today. Last-minute tickets, lowest price, guaranteed.
We're into the bottom tier. This is the Rick Pitino tier. Rick Pitino lasted 15 seconds. These breakdowns are going to last about 15 seconds to get you onto a bird to Philly. Seahawks at Titans. Seahawks are 2.5-point favorites. 7-7. Drew Lock. We saw what happened against Philly. Vrabel spot?
This is a Vrabel spot. That's the first 5 words on my notes here. This is a Vrabel spot off a short week. Seattle's off a short week. Tannehill is going to start for them for the Titans, and I think whether Drew Lock or Geno plays, I still like the chances for the Titans here at home. Tannehill has gotten a really unique experience this year. He got to die and get his flowers. You know, like, they benched him. There was an outpouring of support from people like me in the media, Titans fans, like the respect we have for Tannehill and the run he's engineered there. The Albert Brooks Curb Your Enthusiasm thing comes to mind, where you can actually watch your own funeral. This is a next level deal where you can actually like walk out of the casket and play one more time. And I think if Tannehill beats this team in this meaningless game and looks great, it's going to be electric in that stadium. You know, this is one of those things, it doesn't count for anything, but it counts for a lot. You know, like when I think about my time as a player, I played in so many games that didn't mean anything, but they meant the world to the guys on the field for a number of reasons. This is going to be one of those games for Tennessee. And Will Levis, I know he's probably out, but if there's any chance that you hear this or that you're thinking about playing, do not be a hero, because playing on a high ankle changes your ankle. I've done it. I did it in St. Louis the very next week, got a high ankle, went and tried to play through it, shot it up. My ankle was never the same. And for guys that are considering doing this for no reason, just don't.
Commies at Jets. Aaron would be playing if he were 100%, but he's not, so he won't. Jets are favored by 3.
Exactly. All this stuff that I'm like, I wanted to shake Kyle and Nate. Like, you guys you jumped out of the gym on this thing.
They've been eerily quiet.
Well, because they fell for the okie doke. This was never going to be a thing. Okay, but as for the Jets, you figure off a bad loss like that, they're going to come out and play better. I know that nobody's paying attention to this game. Washington's defense is terrible. If the Jets play a terrible defense, they can move the ball. And so, like, some of that Sam Howell Cinderella stuff, like, he's kind of turning into a pumpkin. Jacoby Brissett came in last week and looked pretty good. So I think this is an interesting game when it comes to both teams and, like, what they're going to glean about their teams. This is a time for two teams that are eliminated, where guys can stand out and get into good standing with the next coach or the next coordinator. So there's going to be some guys playing hard on this field. It doesn't mean a damn thing, and I won't be watching this game, but I actually lean Jets.
Packers are at the Panthers. Look out. Packers favored by 5.
It's a trap. I wish I had given out the Panthers +5. You know, Carolina, they do play teams tough at home. You know, like, they have done it a few times this year. And I think for the Packers, this is a big test, because on one side of things, you look at it and you're like, if we win out, we go to the playoffs. And every game is supposed to feel like a playoff game from here on out. But it's a 1 p.m. game in front of 17 people in Charlotte. The upper bowl is going to be empty. You looked at some of the shots of that stadium last week in the rain. It's really hard to get up in those situations. So I think for Green Bay, not a really veteran-laden offense, right? Like, we talk about some of the issues last week where the more veteran team won. They got to play like vets, and they got to know the gravity of this situation, and they got to know that they got to jump out on these guys. And if they don't, they could be finding themselves in a dogfight. You just played at Lambeau in a game that had playoff atmosphere, and you're going to go play in front of nobody in a fucking hangar in Charlotte. So you have to be better. Win out, you get in.
Chicago Bears are 5-9. They're hosting the Arizona Cardinals. They're favored by 4 points. Bears tough spot after being up 10 and losing to the Browns last week.
Who wants to lose more?
Yep.
You know, that's what it comes down to. I'm still undecided on you know, if I totally get it. I still believe in Justin Fields, but Chicago has to make a decision. And I think the decision comes down to, if you're not sure, you know, a rookie deal quarterback or a guy you're going to pay a lot of money. And so I think for Justin Fields, he's got to be lights out. He's got to be lights out this last month of the season. I was hoping for snow on Christmas in Chicago. We're not going to get it. But this game is totally irrelevant. Totally irrelevant, except for the draft order. And it's just because Mooney couldn't catch the ball. If Mooney could catch the ball, this would be one of the biggest games of the weekend. And we'd be riding that Bears to the playoffs train. But because Mooney couldn't catch the ball, because various people couldn't catch the ball, because they can't score off of turnovers, because why are they here? I have no idea, because they're actually a decent team. Yep. It's crazy to me. If they hadn't played with their food so much, you might have been able to afford last week.
Last game, Christmas Eve, 8:15 NFL Network. Broncos are hosting the Patriots. 37 degrees. Maybe we can get some precipitation there. Broncos are favored by 5.5.
If I'm Bill, do I run a bunch of bullshit? Like, do I just, like, throw them off because you know you're going to get Sean Payton maybe twice a year next year? if he is the coach of the Chargers, and I don't think that's the move, because earlier the one thing I left out, again, I'll say it, is when you got a franchise quarterback, I think you bring in an offensive head coach so you don't lose that coordinator if you have a defensive head coach and things go well for the quarterback. But if it's Bill Belichick, maybe you make that hire. If I'm Bill, last week we said, is this the last time you see him and Andy? Is this the last time you see him and Sean Payton? Maybe not. Maybe this is the first of many. But I think Denver thrives off turnovers. Zappy's a guy you can get some off of. Really stingy run defense on the other end. So the one lifeline looks good, but the other not so good for the Broncos. Like you might have to win left-handed without running the ball. That defense has to create turnovers. And the last thing I'll say is, like, some of the stories that get aggregated on a week-to-week basis, I look at it and I'm like, am I supposed to care about this? And the Sean Payton yelling at Russell Wilson thing falls squarely in that category for me.
You don't want a public apology?
No. What the fuck are we doing? I mean, I've gotten yelled at. I've seen guys on a sideline get told that, and I know people at home can't hear this. They'd probably be upset about this too. But like that their mother should have swallowed them. Like I've heard that in an NFL meeting room. So forgive me for not feeling bad for Russell Wilson because he got yelled at by Sean Payton. He's making. I don't know who's making more than him in the state of Colorado, not holding a baseball bat. Maybe the owner, maybe the guy that owns Red Rocks, but he's one of the highest paid employees in the state. If you're going to get yelled at, take it like a champ. Fucking organization mortgaged their future for you. You played a team last week that the quarterback fell into their lap in a trade, and they were like, what do we want to do with Jared Goff? I guess we'll play him for 3 years and win the division. And on the other end, the Broncos, they mortgaged the future for this guy, and it hasn't been great. So anyways, the point I am making is largely that most of these teams matter. The point I am making largely is that most of these games matter, even when they don't mathematically. You can find a reason. We're going to start going through over the next week or two. We're going to dig for reasons that games matter. The draft, incentives, benchmarks for players. There's something to watch for in every game, and that's why the NFL is king, and that's why we're taking over Christmas.